That's it. Yeah, we have started recording. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Factors.ai podcast. Sri Krishna here. Today, we have a very, very, very special guest. One, he's a great friend and advisor and mentor for us. Second, he's also from a company which we deeply respect. One of the, I mean, path-breaking martech companies, martech revtech companies in the last 10 years, and they have done wonders in the martech world, in the B2B SaaS world, which is there, and that is 6Sense. And we have Sanjay Kini from 6Sense. He's the Chief Customer Officer at 6Sense. Sanjay, welcome to the Factors.ai podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Thanks. So, Sanjay, firstly, before we start off with uh, for this, everyone knows about 6Sense. It's a pretty big company. It's kind of a company which has grown tremendously in the last 5 years or 10 years, actually, if you would say. But before we get into the 6Sense part, if you can tell us a bit about yourself, about your journey into customer success, your journey into 6Sense, and your journey into the growth of 6Sense, it'll be great for us and our audience to hear about it.
Yeah, sure. I'll give a quick intro. I came from the tech space, I did my bachelor's and master's in computer science. So bachelor's in India, did my master's in computer science here, and then I joined a small company called Pure Software, where you probably have heard the name Reed Hastings. He was our CEO, the Netflix CEO, and
Nice.
he was amazing. It was developer tools, and I was an engineer. And we got bought by a company called Rational. And I spent the first 2 years just doing engineering work, and I realized I could be an engineer for the rest of my life and be an average engineer, or move into something that I'm more passionate about, which is meeting with people, customers, but keeping that technical edge. So I moved into sales engineering, spent almost 15 years, doing sales engineering work as well as leading sales engineering teams, working with sales and CS. That's what drew me into customer success, because I always worked for amazing companies, and I would be on the selling side, and then we would sell like an amazing solution, and then a year later I would meet the customer and say, so are you doing all these things? And then they would say, oh no, we're only doing this. And I'm like, what the hell is the CS team doing, right? Because it's such an easy solution, it's amazing, why aren't they doing it? So that's what kind of drew me to customer success. And then I realized what a tough job it is to make your customers successful. But yeah, I feel super lucky. I've been with Rational, where we grew from 50 to, I think 4,000 people, almost from 50 million to 800 million. And then I was at Responses, again, joined when we were about 40, 50 people doing $10 million. We grew to about 300 million before we got bought by Oracle and IPO and all that. And I'm trying to do the same thing with 6Sense. I was 30 people when I joined about 6 years ago.
Oh.
20 customers, $5 million, and now we're almost at 200 million. So
Wow. So 5 to 200 million, and I think you had done 50 to 300. You had also done pretty similar routes, but this is even more expansive, right? Like almost 40x expansion, which is there.
yeah,
One thing which you talked about was pretty interesting. You said that when you were a solutions engineer, when you talk to the customers at the end of the day, you were like, they were always like, did you use it? Did you use it? They didn't use it. And then you was like, oh, the customer success team should have come for that. So it's in a way, it's like identifying gaps or identifying features of the product which could be so amazing or could be so useful for the customers, which somehow or quite a significant amount of times fails the customer or nobody sees it, and you wanted to use that, and that was one of the triggers. Is that the essence of customer success throughout, in terms
yeah.
of
I would
identifying?
say, there are many types of companies. So, for instance, you take a company like a Zoom, right? For instance, yeah, I think over there the essence is maybe driving people to the product and features and all that. But I've always wanted to work for companies that have a business solution that drives results. So if you see Responses as well as 6Sense, the product was just there to kind of do the work, But the reality is why customers buy us is because they're trying to change the way they do business. They're trying to change, they're trying to deliver pipeline and revenue and improve conversions. So those are the things we try to do in customer success. And oh, by the way, we have a product called 6Sense that helps you do that. But I feel the role of the CSM is more driving transformation and driving results and those kind of things.
That's interesting. One other thing, which also moving towards more into 6 Sense part, uh, I've heard this about great physicists and Nobel Prize winners, like especially like Feynman, but I think the same thing applies to companies as well. There are, I mean, the quote about Feynman is this: like when some other mathematician was explaining about Feynman, he was saying like there are normal geniuses. When you see their work, you can understand how they were thinking. And then there are magicians. When you see their work, also you wouldn't be able to figure out how they actually came out with that. The same thing also applies to companies in some sense, where like some companies, when you see them or when you read about them, you know, okay, this is what they do, and this is how I think technically they do what they do. And then there are companies like 6Sense, where even if you read about them and what they say, you don't understand what is the magic behind it. It's something like some form of magic which goes behind your revenue AI and other things, which basically shows the output to the users. If you can take some time to explain what 6Sense does and how does it do the magic, so that would be really great for us.
No, that's a good question. So I'll start off with a funny story. Like for the first 2 years of 6Sense, whenever I told people like, "Hey, what company is 6Sense?" and they're like, "That Bruce Willis movie?" Like no, not that one. But it feels good now when you say 6Sense. They're like, "Oh yeah, I use it," or my team uses it. We've come a long way. But what do we do? So at the very essence, we're helping sales and marketing teams of our customers figure out who's in market to buy their solution, right? So typically you have a TAM or an ICP that's 5,000, 10,000 accounts. And if you were to go after all of them, you're probably going to fail. You're not going to get same conversion ratios. So we tell them, hey, if you have these 5,000 accounts, don't spend time on all of them. Spend time on these 500 instead. And the way we do that is we've coined this term called the dark funnel. So if you think about all research that happens today, it's not like 10, 20 years ago where companies would say, here's your RFP, come back to me, and then they look at 4 solutions and then decide. What ends up happening is they're doing the research. 70% of the buying cycle is done before you even call the vendors. And then at that point, most of the vendors become column fodder. So you want to be able to get to them in that first 70% of the time when they're coming to your website, they're researching your competitors, they're reading blogs about you and your competitors and the space. So that's what we're able to uncover, and we get them during that dark funnel for our customers and say, hey, go talk to them now, because if you talk to them later, your competitors have already influenced the RFP. So we help sales and marketing teams get to their accounts, customers faster, which end up being more conversions, bigger deal sizes, and shorter sales cycles.
And most importantly, being there before your competitors are.
Yeah.
So, what is this percentage of this dark funnel? How long, if there are like, let's say, 100 customers in the market, what percentage would be in the dark funnel for, let's say, a large B2B company?
You mean if there are 100 accounts?
If there are 100 accounts in the market or in a ICP or this thing, market size is 100, how much should, I mean, the number of people signing up
Also,
or even, yeah,
like depending on the company, it could be anywhere from 5 to 15%.
5 to 15%. So of the 5 to 15%, let's say 15 companies are there, barely 1% would be the signing up. You reveal the remaining 13 or 14 of them, which wouldn't have actually come through the whole system.
Yeah, and it's not like you're not doing anything for the remaining 85.
Mm-hmm.
So, we think about it as a funnel. So the job of the marketing team is to move those 85 accounts down the funnel, whereas
Mm-hmm.
sales spends time at the bottom. When we say,
Got it.
okay, these guys are actually in market, go talk to them versus going talking to the 100 people.
Wow, that's good. And in this dark funnel, do people actually come to the website, or this is even before coming into the website itself?
It could be before coming. So it depends on the company, right? So if,
Mhm.
for instance, you can take almost like two separate scenarios. One
Mhm.
is where you're the market leader, then most companies would come to you to say, okay, here, I want to learn about it. But then there's also other companies, like a small company that's competing with a large company. In that case, they
Mhm.
probably don't even know who you are, right? So then they'll probably go to your competitors' website and research your competitors, and you want to know that we're not able to tell them that they went to the competitor's website, but we
Mhm.
will be able to tell them that they're researching these keywords and they've gone and
Got
looked at these blogs and all that.
got it. That's pretty amazing in terms of like conceptually, it makes so much sense because it's like there are these people, these are in my ICP. I would want to reach out to them. And I know they are searching for a similar solution like us. If I'm able to reach out to them much faster or before or in the same time as when they are talking to my competitors, at least I have a better shot rather than me being totally out of the game is this thing. But
Yeah, so like a good example would be, we have one customer, they do Oracle implementations.
mhm,
So no one's heard of them, really small company. But all they do is they're competing with Oracle. Like once a deal is done on the Oracle side, they're just trying to get the services business. So now if they know someone is researching Oracle applications and those kind of things, then they know, okay, I'm going to go after those accounts because we
okay.
know that they're researching Oracle and they compete with Oracle for Oracle services. And they just like printing money basically in that case.
But one thing is, I mean, conceptually great, but how do you do it? How does it that you know like what people are searching for? How does it that you know like, I mean, this is like very top of the funnel, right? How does that happen?
I mean, a lot of it is our secret sauce, but at a very high level, we have this concept called the company ID. So we're able to match people who are people to companies. So even though you're sitting in Bangalore and I'm sitting in my home in Palo Alto, like 6Sense will know that I work for 6Sense, and that obviously they know because I'm on the VPN. But if I worked for a different company as well, they'd be able
Mhm.
to tell because we do this thing around IP addresses and device IDs, and we triangulate across all different kinds of things to be able to say, hey, this person works for this company. So that's one aspect. Like we've done match tests against pretty much most of our competitors, and we're usually double when we're able to match our you say 100 people came to my website, tell me how many of those which company they work for. We're really good at that. The second part is the content. So now we have to know where are these people going, and then we scrape if they go and look at the content, what are they researching? So then we scrape the pages and we're able to tell, oh, by the way, if they were reading this page about BI, then maybe they're looking at like a Domo versus Tableau or something like that, right? So we're able to then put taxonomy around all the web pages, B2B web pages, and
Mhm.
then match that to keywords. And then the website is pretty easy because all our customers basically just put a JavaScript on their website, and then we
Mhm.
can tell them like who's coming to their website. Typically, like 1 or 2 or 3% of the companies that come because they fill out a form. But what
Mhm.
about the remaining 90 something percent that haven't filled out a form? You still want to know which companies they are.
Got it. Oh, that's pretty amazing. And I think you also mentioned it's like compared to competitors, we have a much better match rate and also knowing like what people are doing this thing. So, I mean, and it's a defined category. There are multiple players in the ABM. What does 6Sense do better than most others do? Is it the product? Is it the kind of the market they operate, or is it the customer success? What is it they do differently?
So I would say, we have to give credit where it's due. Like there were companies before us that were doing really well, who kind of coined the ABM term. I think what we did well is we focused, number one, on the customer and trying to drive results versus trying to get them to spend money and display and all that, right? So we don't even care if they spend money on display with us. What we care is driving the results. So our product was built for that. The other thing is, we were the first company that started doing intent as a whole, and then saying, let's take intent and buying stages and use machine learning and AI to figure out what accounts to go after. A lot of the other companies were profile based, and then they were, oh, if you sold to United, go sell to Delta, right? So that was their predictive, which to me doesn't make sense. It is a starting point, but it's not very good. But then the other part was the AI. So what we're doing is we're saying, oh, did they come to your website? Did they research keywords? Is it one person or is it five people? Is it decision makers? Are they engaging with your marketing campaigns? So all these together, we put together in a thing, and we say, okay, now instead of going after these 5,000, go after these 500. So all that goes into that. And then we do a research across all our customers every quarter. And we have this concept called a 6QA, a 6 cents qualified account. And we say, okay, how does 6QAs do versus non-6QA accounts? And typically it's anywhere from conversion is like anywhere from 5 to 20x.
Wow.
So 5 to 20x.
So your
So
predictor, so who you predict would be a customer is more likely or by 5 to 20x as a factor, but let's say 10x factor than who you don't predict to be as a customer
correct. So
in
if your
terms of
conversion
conversion
is 1% for non-6QA,
normally
it would be somewhere from 5 to 20%.
10%. Go. That's pretty impressive in terms of how you explain this thing and focusing on the customer part rather than how the customer is driving success rather than how much they are spending or what they're doing. And also, one interesting point you mentioned is like it's not general rule based saying that you sell to airlines, you sell to similar companies. It's a lot more into what's there in the market. Who are the ones who are actively looking for a solution like yours and then selling to them for you to build that
Yeah.
out the thing? That's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I think
Interesting.
I'll do a disservice to my CS team if I don't give them a kudos, because I think that's a big part of why we do well, because
Yes.
it's not just the product, right? I think in the end, it's change management. We're telling sales and marketing teams to do their jobs completely differently. And if you just hand them the product, there's no way they know how to do it. And I think, kudos to my CS team where they're actually driving change there. We call them change agents, and they're telling them how to, completely rethink about their job, how to do their job and, drive more results.
Actually, that's actually a very good point for me to segue into the next set of questions which I had. I mean, 5 million to 200 million, 40x growth.
Yeah.
I mean, this kind of growth, of course, it happens because of more and more new customers coming in, other things, but it also really happens because one, customers stick for multi-year deals. Customers stick to pay much more than what they had originally committed to pay for. It doesn't happen. And all that happens because of the customer success team. So if you can tell us the path from 5 to 10 to 50 to 100 to 200, what is what is the secret sauce from the customer success or the change agents part, which
Yeah.
team here?
No, I think, like everybody asks me, like, hey, what have you been doing for the last 5 years? Like, same job. And, honestly, like, it has been a completely different job every single year, even though I
Okay.
have this exact same title. So, first year was like, honestly, like firefighting. I pretty much knew every customer, not just every customer, every person at every customer. We grew from, 5 million to 10 million that year. And then, so it was just getting to know the customer. I think you asked me earlier what made us successful. I think one of the big pivots we also made was we said ABM is not about ABM, it's about ABX. So we focused not just on marketing, we focused on sales as well. So we built like a whole sales track very early, like 5 years ago. When everybody else was doing marketing, we said it's marketing and sales. This cannot be successful unless sales gives you the thumbs up. And honestly, like we churn zero customers when sales says, uh, "Yep, we like 6 Sense." So then we kind of pivoted in that sense. But coming back to like your question, I do feel like 5 to 10 was that, 10 to 20 was building the right leadership team under me to say, okay, now let's go build. Um, get the right people in. And I think people is honestly one of the most important things when you are building a small, starting from scratch and building a small team. And then once you have those people in place, they'll get people like them. So then 20 to 40, I think it was more around scaling and building other orgs. So back then, your CSM did support and training and onboarding and everything and CS, right? So then at that point, we started building out those functions around support and training. And then 40 to actually 40, we didn't go to 80, we just went 40 to 100. um, and then from that point on, it was building a separate onboarding team, putting in more process, getting in like more tools like a game site and things like that, so we can inspect more. So I would say at a smaller stage, it's more of an art. As you kind of go and become larger, it's still an art, I believe, but there is a lot more science into it, because now your team has grown. Like I could go talk to 5 CSMs, and now and 50 customers I can keep in my head. But right now we have over 100 CSMs and over 2,000 customers, so we still need to know exactly like what is going on with each customer. So putting that into like process, dashboards to inspect health and things like that become really important.
That was very interesting point which you also made, where it moves from art to science. I think the early stages as a customer success person is more like you know the customers very well, you keep talking to them, and it is more like conversation and trying to understand their problems and solving for the problem with the product very very clearly. But going into the science part, what are the kind of metrics you follow as a customer success person, and which were the what was the stage at which the metrics changed, if you can take
Yeah.
us through that part?
So that's a good question. Again, it changes over time. So in the beginning, you're not caring so much about profitability and all that. It's more about what is my gross retention and what is my net retention. Those are kind of like your lagging indicators. They're obviously like a bunch of leading indicators around adoption and things like that. But then as you grow up, then you start to see, okay, now should I look at NPS, right? So because now I can't really like have everything in my head, because when we were 50 customers, I knew our NPS in my head, like doing the calculations myself. Uh, but over time, you want to get NPS. Give me a second. And then the other thing you start to look at is also book of business. So you want to make sure that you're starting to move towards that scalability perspective, where you say, okay, each customer success manager should have like a book of $2 million, and maybe 10 to 20 customers. um, and then we started doing segmentation as well. We didn't have segments like all CSMs were the same. Over time we ended up saying, let's create a strategic enterprise growth CSM team.
Any industry level segments?
Sorry, just
Yeah, no
recovering.
worries.
And then I would say the last thing, like as you grow up, like now what we're thinking about is more metrics like gross margin. We always had gross margin in there, but we didn't pay enough attention to it. And then other things like what is CS as a percentage of your ARR? So, what does CS spend as a percentage of ARR? So you want to start measuring that, and you want that to go lower and lower as time goes by. Verticals, we just created one recently. But like I think as your team grows, you want to do that specialization, because like for instance, our strat teams have 5 to 10 customers managing $3 million each, whereas our commercial teams have 1.5 to $2 million managing 25 customers each, right? So does that answer your
And
question?
no, it does, and that also got me to ask a couple of more questions as well. One thing is like, how do you expand? It's, you don't land a customer at $200,000, right?
Yeah,
You might land them at 50K. How does the expansion happen? How does the customer expand? That too for a product which is revenue marketing, because it may not be just users, right? User level expansion might happen for something like a kind of Asana or similar products, but this should be more something else significantly from a product usage point of view, right? From a 6 sense, given how complex the product is. How do you expand?
yeah. So pricing, like we have actually grown quite a lot over the years, and we've, if you think about what we do, we serve multiple personas. So you think about, there's marketing ops, sales ops, call them revenue ops. Then you have digital marketers, you have demand gen marketers, you have AEs, BDRs, the CMO. All these are different personas, and we have use cases for each persona. So the way we can expand is, one dial is that we say, oh, you have digital marketers using us. Do you want sales to start using us? Okay, we'll end up, turning on that use case. It's more dollars for that. So that's kind of the breadth. And then you have the depth, which is each of those use cases have a bunch of dials we can turn, like with number of users for sales, or number of display accounts you want to sell, you want to target through display, or number of API calls you want to do like website personalization. So each of those use cases have different dials. And then there's the larger companies where you're talking to one department, and then there could be five different departments. So Cisco is a customer, you know, they spend a lot of money with us, but at the same time, we're just scratching the surface because we're not talking to like 80% of the teams. So
Got it. And more importantly, I mean, given that from my research, I know like 6Sense has been pretty acquisitive in the last couple of years as well. So a lot of, I mean, new people coming into the team, new set of even products actually coming into this thing, and that would also change your overall ACV or even the segments at which you are selling to, or even the industries at which you are selling to, etc. How do you handle that?
yeah, no, that's a good question. So we have done three or four acquisitions in the last couple of years, and a lot of companies do acquisitions to increase their revenue. We've not done that, so we bought very small companies that we feel can be game changing for us. That's been our strategy. So, for instance, we bought a company called called Fortella, which was for pipeline intelligence. So that gets us to the CMO, and we're able to like tell our CMOs, "Hey, where's your gap for pipeline for the next quarter?" We also bought a company called Slimtel, which is now completely integrated with our platform. We did a big launch a couple of months ago, which puts us straight with Zoom Info. We'll be able to compete with them. And again, all these companies were like, single digit $1 million. So it's not like it improved our revenue a lot. And then lastly, we bought a company called Sales Whale, which has been game changing. Again, like 10 customers, less than $1 million in revenue when we bought them. But at the same time, what it does is it does the job of a BDR, and it goes
Mhm.
back and forth with prospects till you get to a point where they want a meeting, and then they'll pass it on to the AE. So,
Uh,
it's not taking the job of the BDR away, but it's, if you have 10 BDRs, you can only go after, let's say, 1,000 accounts, but your ICP is 5,000. You're not doing anything with the remaining 4,000. So why not put AI to work on that, right? And that's
in
what.
all, I think in all sense, it somehow gets aligned to the original Six Sense. This thing, right? There is so much of companies in the dark which you might not be reaching out in one way or the other, either through your sales methods or into your marketing methods. And Six Sense finds a way to reach out to them in some level, and all the acquisitions fill in the pieces.
Yeah.
But given the market, uh, and also given now with your acquisitions, your ACVs would also range from anywhere from 10K to all the way up to, let's say, 500K, etc. And also segments, you would be serving some small mid companies as well at some level. And this thing, how do you handle churn?
Not very well. I feel like someone just stuck something in my heart when I see a customer churn. No, I'm just kidding. But no, we try really hard to keep our customers.
Mhm.
The good news for us compared to a lot of other companies out there where you have a single product,
Mhm.
sometimes like a customer might say, "Hey, this is not working for us, and we don't believe in this." Then first thing we try to do is like, "Okay, why don't you try this other product instead?"
Mhm.
And a lot of times we're able to save that
Mhm.
um, customer for that in that way. I think one of the advantages we have, which is also a disadvantage, is that in the end, what we're doing is we do our EBRs, our executive business reviews, where we're showing them the value that we've driven in the last quarter. So, how much pipeline have you generated? How much revenue? What is your conversions compared to before? So that really gets customers to a point where they're like, "Oh shoot, can I live without 6 Sense or
Got
not?"
it. So, given that you are directly into the revenue and pipeline, and people see you as something which is necessary for them to keep their jobs, it's very difficult for them to.
Yeah, and you are going to get the occasional, oh, budgets have cut, teams have been laid off, companies going out of business. Um, even like, hey, the director, the CEO knows the competitors, someone. Sometimes you end up losing deals like that. But, like we've been pretty proud. We've maintained over 90% gross retention over the last few years. So, that's something we're pretty proud of.
And let's say going into 2023, and also given that you have seen the whole journey from 5 10 this thing, and uh, currently we are hearing stories of even companies at $10 million or $20 million totally revamping their product or even moving out into new segments in this thing, given that the market has changed and a lot of things, assumptions which might have been true maybe 1.5 years back is not true anymore. What is any suggestions on how you handle a market like this for especially companies which are at $5 to $10 million revenue?
It's all about adoption. I think, you just have to make sure at your core, you need to understand what is it that your product is doing for your customers. And then what are the key metrics that'll help me understand whether they're going to churn or not. So, I was talking about some of the lagging indicators earlier. You want to know what the leading indicators are. So understand, like, hey, if they do X, Y, and Z, there's almost a 0% chance that they'll churn. So what are those things? And if you don't have those things, then rethink your product, because you need to have something like that that helps you feel that, talk to your customers. You're like, okay, what do you need to make sure that um, you would continue to use your product? So I think in these times, it becomes like 10 times more um, necessary to find those metrics that are leading indicators and then measure them, inspect what you expect, measure them and make sure that your customers are hitting that. In these times, I think what ends up happening is, budgets are tight, everything is scrutinized. So, what will end up happening is the strong companies will actually get a lot stronger. I've been old enough to see this and, been through the dot-com bust and the global financial crisis in 2010. And what you've always seen is, there's a little bit of a slowdown, and then the companies that do well just suddenly take off. So also during this time, I would say just make sure you're getting everything lined up, your ducks lined up, figure process out, because it's tough to do those kind of things when you're growing like crazy. Um, so I think, those are the kind of things I would give advice to teams.
So for startups or even Series A companies, the thing is to go to keep going to back to customers, specifically keep asking them like, are there metrics or are there goals or are there expectations out of the product being met, consistently being met, and then work around the metrics around that.
Yeah.
And yes, I think that makes a lot of sense for us to our and even companies like us and also so many others to actually look at and this thing. Um, Little more moving away from the customer success part and the metrics part, and you talked about the art and science of that. Uh, I have gone through the legendary book from the 6 Senses marketing team, which is no forms, no spam, no cold calls, which is there, and which talks a great deal about how the dark funnel and the marketing part goes on. And I think the second edition has just come out, which also takes in the revenue aspect also of this thing. Of course, there's customer success is very entwined into both parts. It's like revenue, very much clearly into the revenue. Where does customer success comes into play with marketing and revenue at 6 Sense? How does the Trinity work in a sense, or the tripod work?
Yeah, no, we're lucky at 6 Sense because, Latney is our CMO, Mark runs sales and I run CS, and we're like a very close team, like with a go-to-market team. I get comped on upsells, growth, and renewals. So does Mark on the upsells as well, and then Latney also. Like for us, it's all about how do we grow the company. So we consider ourselves one team in the end, whether we're sales, marketing, or CS. But if you think about um, the future of ABX, for instance, CS will play a much bigger part. Right now, it's more about marketing and sales. But as companies move into this SaaS model, like forget about like software now, even car companies are moving towards SaaS. They're like, oh, so it's all about renewing every year. So in the end, like 80 to 90% of the revenue comes from your existing customers. So, and if you spend like time trying to figure out how to get new customers, you're doomed, right? So we as a company are also thinking about how do we get CS in the fold as well, because you could do things like churn models to say, okay, this account has more affinity to churn, so here's what you need to do. So those are the kind of things we're thinking in the future. But I think we have like a lot of synergies between say CS and marketing. So our head of we have a head of customer marketing. She's amazing, Heather. uh, she's built this amazing community for us, for our customers, called Rev City. So our customers are in there, like there's all the stuff that we put, but they're also talking to each other. So, and trying to figure out how to help each other, which is amazing. They own our customer references. So we work with them on that. We put together a lot of local customer events where communities of customers can meet, and we put that together. And we have our conference Breakthrough, which happens in October. And honestly, like I'm being biased, but most of our customers say it's the best conference they've been to. So that's all run by marketing. Um,
Got it.
and they do like all these digital things as well, like around for customers, display ads, or email marketing based on the stage of that customer, things like that. And
Got it.
to be honest, like I would say Latney, I always joke with her, she's our number one CSM, because she talks to so many customers. And in the end, that ends up feeding our product as well, right? So, both Latney, Mark, me, we have a very big say in what goes in the product, because we're talking to customers more than they are, probably.
That's actually very good. That's like actually the marketing team of every company, or at least B2B SaaS company, being the first CSM in a sense. One is like not just a customer evangelist, but more importantly, a customer success person, so that one, they get inputs on to, or they feed inputs back into the customers on what all the product can do, but more importantly, get inputs and feedback also on how they are doing it, and then return it. That was one very important point. The second point, which you also mentioned, was very interesting. That is like you have a big say on what goes into the product. How do you use 6Sense yourself?
Yeah, so I think that's like the number one thing we focus on. So, for instance, if you ask me who's our best customer, I would say 6Sense. We have this internal term called 6Sense for 6Sense. And whether it's the marketing team or the sales team, everybody's using 6Sense. And like we can say, hey, that's why we grew so much, because we were able to focus on the right accounts. In fact, even our CSM teams use 6Sense to try and see, hey, are they researching our competitors like 6 months before they see that there are triggers that come to us that say, oh, they're talking to your competitor, and then you can be a little more careful. But overall, like if you come to any of our events, you'll see that all our uh, marketing teams get swarmed because they want to be like us. So the kind of results we've driven for each of those use cases is pretty tremendous. And then a lot of what they do ends up saying, hey, in fact, they're like the worst customer for the products. The product team, like for us, they're great. Product team's like, oh my god, you guys are on my case. But in the end, they're actually making product better. So product, I was just joking, product appreciates them.
That's
um,
fair,
they're
and that's
third party.
having the being the customer zero. in a
Yeah.
sense, right?
So
That's
our alpha beta program is usually alpha is our team using it. Beta, we get a bunch of customers. So we're lucky in the sense that our customer like is our marketing team, right? So
got
we're
it.
able to do that. A lot of marketing teams don't have that luxury where they understand their customer that well.
That's pretty interesting. One thing which I also want to know is like, given the customer success is so much about making the customers successful at the first level, can you relate some stories, no name basis, also with this thing about customers who have phenomenally succeeded thanks to success?
Yeah, I think like there are so many to talk about. Like we go to our
I
conferences
mean,
and sometimes
more
I
like startups. If you can tell about some startups using 6Sense and becoming unicorns down the line, that would be really interesting for us also to talk about.
yeah, no, I'll tell you, for instance, like 3 4 years ago we were primarily enterprise software, so large companies. And then about, I'd say, 3 years ago we started our what we call commercial space, and that's our fastest growing market right now. So for us, commercial is 500 and less employees. And about 3 years ago we had zero customers in that space. Now we have over 1,000. So like what we end up seeing is they start, and if you think about them, like one of the big challenges we had was change management was very tough when you're telling companies like HP or Dell to change, because it has to go through this whole process and you need 25 people to approve and all that, and you need the sales up. Well, I'll do it in 4 months, right? But at the same time, your smaller companies are more agile. So you talk to the CMO, the CRO, like, what? We can do this? Boom. So it's much easier for them to take on like a 6 Sense. What they need from us is more guidance to say, like, hey, what do I need to do to get better? But we've seen like customers start very small and then they end up using more use cases, and they've gone from like 20 30 million dollars to 100 200 million dollars. And a lot of times they're saying, hey, if it wasn't for 6 Sense we wouldn't get there. In fact, like there were some accounts that we had where they use our data
Mhm.
to figure out which markets they should go into and which markets they should not go into. So they can say, okay, should I move to Australia? Should I have a new team over there? They'll build an ICP there, see if there's any intent, see if the profile fit is there, and then say, yes or no. So sometimes for these smaller companies, we're even more important because you could have made a big mistake, like putting a go-to-market team there and then suddenly realizing there's not enough accounts and things like that.
Got it. One other thing which, when you talked about also as companies, when 6Sense grows, they also make companies grow pretty big. What other products does 6Sense work well with? I mean, it's like, which are the products or which are the use cases which become very complementary to 6Sense?
Yeah. So I would say, Salesforce, like CRM and marketing automation, is central for all our customers. So whether it's Salesforce or HubSpot or Microsoft Dynamics on the CRM side, and then on the marketing automation side, it's Marketo, Eloqua, HubSpot, some of the other ones over there. So that's kind of table stakes. Now, if you talk about the ecosystem, we work pretty well with a sales loft or an outreach, because the BDRs live in there. So, we have an iframe that goes into Salesforce. But if the BDRs or in outreach or sales loft, then why should we put it in Salesforce? So we push all the data to those products. And
So
then
you
we
have
also,
iframe and outreach as well.
correct. And then we also create, like we integrate in the sense that you can create automatic uh, sales loft or outreach cadences from our product itself. So you can automate that. Oh, this person just came to this website and they reached out. So now let's put them in this cadence. So we do recommendations as well based on what we've seen in the past and what we worked using AI to say, go run this cadence on this person, things like that. uh, then there's the whole ecosystem around the website. So there are companies like Drift and Qualified who would, interact with customers that are coming to your website. So we give them the intelligence to say, oh, instead of blindly talking to them, they make an API call to us. We'll tell them the account name and then the size of the company. Are they a customer or not? And now the conversations can be a lot more intelligent through the chatbot. So there's that aspect. There's this. There's also the gifting platforms like Sendoso and Alice and all that. So based on where they are, you can do the right kind of gift and spend right amount of money, right? And then LinkedIn, Google, again, we
On the
can do
marketing.
marketing campaigns through there. So it's a pretty big ecosystem. I'm missing probably another 25 things, but we do have a slide with, we think of ourselves as what we call the central nervous system. So where we have all the data, and then we'll tell all the other products like, oh, did we lose it for a second?
Yeah, just lost it for a second. That's okay. Yeah. Central nervous system.
Did we lose each other for a second there?
Yeah, we did lose each other for a
Okay.
second there.
So yeah, we think of ourselves as the central nervous system, and then we have all the data, and what we tell our other products, like I said, whether it's Drift or Sales Loft or Marketo, we're giving the intelligence, and those channels to then go and use that intelligence to communicate with the prospects and customers.
This was actually interesting. And last part which you mentioned is the marketing when you were having multiple channels and also gifting and field events and content, Art Factory and few others also which remain your partners and how it runs into your central nervous system. One thing which is something which was how does 6Sense deal with the attribution problem? Or what
Yeah.
is the thought leadership from 6Sense on the attribution side? How do you look at different channels and different activities from the marketing side, driving ROI and optimizing your marketing costs? Because in a sense where like if we want to conserve costs and this thing, of course, it starts with some of the spends as well, apart from generating more revenue. Your
Yeah.
thoughts on that?
Thoughts are, like I came from B2C marketing. I spent almost 10 years there with responses, and everything was about attribution, right? You won't spend a single dollar without knowing what the attribution is. In B2B, it's a lot more difficult to do attribution, I would say, because, like in the end, everybody wants to take credit. It's like, oh, I got them to the website, or I was the rep who did the good meeting, or we took them to this nice dinner, or oh, the CEO comes in at the end and they did a good negotiation or something like that. So it becomes a tough thing, but I would say that every marketer really wants to know what is helping me close deals, right? And what is helping me build more pipeline. So there is that appetite for it on the B2B space, but it's tough because it's a considered purchase. um, so most marketers would say, "Hey, if I have these 100 opportunities, can you tell me what caused me to get these opportunities? And if you can tell me for sure, then I want to spend more money there, right?" So that is the holy grail. I think most companies have not cracked it. I hope Factors is the one that is the groundbreaking company that
Yeah,
does
we
that.
are on that. Yeah, we are on that path, and also thanks to we are building more partnerships also on those lines with the central nervous system, so that we are able to map the entire journey and show the users of like what started the conversation, what are the parts which influence the conversation, and what are the parts which ended the conversation.
Yeah,
And as in B2B, the interesting part is it's not like any one touch is important. There are multiple touches across multiple stakeholders, which is important. And
yeah,
it's like itself is a big puzzle to unravel on
yeah.
its own for people
But I
to
think if
see.
we solve it, I mean, people will come in hordes because, it doesn't have to be 100% accurate. Even if it's like, 70, 80% accurate directionally, people will say, hey, I'm going to spend more money here because that got me this.
God, that's thanks for that affirmation as well. The last technical question before we move into more non-serious stuff. What are the trends you have seen ABM market, at least for the last 6 years, you have seen from, let's say, 5 million to 200 million, how the ABM market has evolved. both including what your competitors are doing, other adjacent players in the ecosystem are doing, how maybe you might get even more competition and other things. Where do you think it's evolving? You did mention some part about ABX and customer success being key, but what are the trends, near term trends, 2022, 23, 24, 25 trends in ABM and
So
also in
number
marketing?
one, I would say that probably the ABM term will disappear because it's not about marketing. So it's all about revenue, ABX, and revenue is sales, marketing, customer success. I think to me that's like number one. Number two, I think it'll become more streamlined. So like if you ask me, like 4 years ago, like I said, Bruce Willis, like I see dead people. That's what 6Sense was. But it used to be like more of a research project, like 4 or 5 years ago. Oh, I'll throw like 50K to see if it works, or 100K, and then it went from that to being a nice to have in the last 2 3 years, and now it feels like it's almost like a must have. So you will see that happening, like, oh, what is my CRM, what is my marketing automation, what is my ABX platform, right? So that trend will appear. And then I'd say the third one is more around, um, like have more AI. So like previously it was more like, okay, let me do the smarts, versus having AI be at the center of ABX, and it telling you like, hey, here's what you should be doing, right? Maybe you may or may not do it, but what if they can say, oh, why don't you do these 3 campaigns here and spend this kind of money here because it's going to do that, or go into this market, like it looks like you're not spending enough money or time in these kind of accounts. So it'll start to be more AI driven. We're already seeing that, like I mentioned, our conversational email product. Like literally, I think we did one for our existing customers, um,
Uh,
and we just had like Janine, who's our head of customer success on my team, and we did a Janine bot, and we said, "Hey, are you interested in conversate?" We did a conversational email upsell bot, and we sent it to, I think, 5,000 people, and we got, in 2 weeks we had 150 meetings set up,
wow,
and it was zero CSM work, zero BDRs, and that was it. Like 3%, I think, was the conversion. And
wow,
so just think about like the power of what AI can do. And it was not like one email; it's like going back and forth
multiple
to
emails
get the
going through.
meeting.
Actually, yeah, it's not. People say it's not never the first touch. It's also not never the first email, but there are multiple emails and also nuances and changes within each email. And if all those are automated, then it's basically like makes the BDR far more powerful, or BDR himself as a quasi AE itself to generate, convert meetings itself in the first place. So that's amazing. One thing else is like, I mean, you've seen the market. You are in Palo Alto in the Valley. You have seen so many Martech, RevTech companies. As one person fondly used to tell me, is like Martech is like the graveyard of so many founders and companies as well, because it's like highly competitive and it's very difficult to shine out, which is there. Can you name some of the companies which you have seen in the last year, or which you're thinking, which are kind of like can break off or can are solving for something unique? Some predictions, or like these are the use cases which you think should be solved for, which you mentioned, but which are the companies which are working on those use cases as well? Which is something. Any suggestions of that?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of AI coming around, the customer success side as well, which
Mhm.
is again, you would think, oh, that's customer success, but I think that's again revenue. So trying to
Mhm.
predict like what is the chance that you will end up renewing this, or what is the chance that you think it'll work or not. um, I think you guys are doing some good work here, like trying to figure out, hey, can I help my customers understand where my money is going and what I should be spending money on. The graveyard thing, I think, like it our board used to tell us that like 4 years ago. But I would say in the end, it boils down to how much value you're adding for your customers. Like you look at companies like Zoom Info, they've done really well. I mean, obviously we're gonna be competing with them, but we have a lot of respect for them. And they're Martech, we're Martech, we've done well. So I think there'll be a bunch of companies that emerge in this space that will do well. I think Bambora is like another good one. I think we now partner with them. Initially we were like, oh, should I use 6Sense or Bambora for intent? Now it's like a good partnership with them. Um, I think companies like Gong and Clary, they're all in the RevTech space as well. So
A
you know,
very interesting part of what you said is like a lot of your competitors are also your partners, and also with deep respect and also kind of focus. And that's a pretty amazing the way how Six and sees the world, where it's not like a zero sum game, but it's more like as partners and other parts serving
yeah.
different markets, you can emerge. That's very interesting to see that. What keeps you awake at night? Sometimes?
So for me, it's the customer health. Like, what is the red that we're not seeing? So a lot of times it's you know we'll go into a customer meeting and we find out something, and then we're like, why did we not know that? We should have known that.
Never a competition, never a new tech or anything like that.
No, I think we're in control of our own destiny. I think obviously, like competitors are gonna do their thing, but in the end, you can only control the controllables. I think that's our philosophy. And you know like I have this thing that I heard a long time ago, is like, play good golf. For the golfers who listen, it's like you just have to play your game. If someone else plays better, you're not going to go and try and kill them with a knife or something, but you can just go play your best. And that's all you can do. And that's what we do. I mean, obviously we can learn from our other companies or learn from competitors if they're doing something well, but in the end you have to control your own destiny and be the best.
That's fine. I mean, that's a. I think I take away a lot from that, and I might make a post on that as well. So thanks for that, borrowing that.
Yeah.
Anyways, moving into the non-serious parts of it. One thing which I do ask leaders, and specifically leaders in SaaS companies which have grown immensely, and this thing. What are, let's say, if you look back into your own career and where you are, uh, what are the kind of key inflection points you feel were very, very important? And if you are, let's say, advising someone else who wasn't 30 years old or 25 years old, what would be that to tell them to basically like to get into a successful career or career outcome?
Yeah. I would say like number one for me has been surrounding myself with really smart people and people who are better than me, and getting like a good mentor who has your back and helps you through your career. A lot of times I find younger people, they're like, oh, I'm gonna jump to this next job because they give me like 10 or 20% more. And that's a short-term fix. I think just putting your effort and working with the team for a long time and building your craft and your brand, I think pays for itself in the long term. So I think for me that's number one. And then like with LinkedIn and all this, your brand is your brand, so you cannot hide. So like, do good work and it'll come back to you. If you do like bad work, it'll come back to you too. So I think like all the things around like hard work, um, doing the right things, putting in the right amount of effort. And I think like I wouldn't underplay the whole network thing. Like for instance, just making sure you surround yourself with people who are smarter than you. If you're the smartest person in the room, then for a long time, then you're in the wrong room. Um, you should try and work with people who are better than you, and hire people who are better than you too. Like, I think that's a big thing that it's tough to learn in your young age, because you're like, oh, if I'm the boss, I need to hire people who are not as good as me, because I don't
Yeah.
want them to take my job. But I think it's the reverse. So you should have
Yes.
people who are way better than you. So when they do good work, you look actually a lot
Much
better.
better.
So
Got it.
yeah.
That's good. Lastly, any personality, I mean, historical or current personality, which has really inspired you through your journey?
Um, there are obviously quite a lot. I feel like very lucky. Like, like you asked about what got me here. And there are a lot of people who are, not like Bill Gates or Steve Jobs or anyone, but there's people who, if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be where I am today. But, I do admire, like, Bill Gates, for instance, what he's done. Like, he changed the world once with Windows and all that, and then suddenly he quit, and now he's doing the same thing in philanthropy and making the world better. And then Steve Jobs, I would say, is like just the simplicity of the product and customer centricity. And I aspire, like, hey, can we be like Apple? Because customers run in hordes, like, to spend double what the competitors. I mean, we're trying to do that. But I would say, if it boils down to one person who, like, I really changed my life, I would say it's probably my mom. She grew up in a small village in Karnataka. She didn't speak English. And then she learned English when she was like 16 or 18. Got married to my dad, moved to Bombay, and then she did like a MBA when I was about 8 or 9 years. She started her career at that age, and
Wow.
then you live in India, so you probably know the company
Yeah.
Pidilite.
Oh,
Uh,
yes, of
so
course.
she
Yeah,
joined
it's
Pidilite like me when I joined. She was like 50, 100 people when
okay.
I joined it, and it's now like, for the US folks, it's like Johnson and Johnson or Procter and Gamble kind of company.
Yeah, it's, I think, one of the best stock stories as well. I think almost every single
Yeah, that's
stock
still my best investment.
long-term investors. That's pretty amazing. That also
Yeah,
shows a
no,
lot
but
about.
I think she ended up going to, yeah, she became like a leader over there. She was top like 10, 20 people in the
Yeah.
company at Pidlite. And then she ran, like, pretty much, the CEO would say, oh, she started in people, then she went into sales, went into purchasing, and she was leading those teams. And, she didn't move there because she wanted to. She moved there because the leadership team thought there's a big problem there, and she had nothing. She didn't know anything, but they would still put her as head of that. So, like, I learned a lot from her. She had this never give up attitude. She just took on new things that she had no clue about and excelled. Um, she had this thing, everything, anything is possible. And then instilling in your leadership that, hey, I can do anything, but also in your team that I have your back. So she was pretty awesome at doing that. She really believed in her team. And the hard work was another big thing. Like, you probably heard that, hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. So she believed in that. But I think the other two things is, like, she also believed that family was more important than work. And I think for me it's the same thing. So a lot of my management style and what I believe in comes from her. So
So I think next time I use Ferricol, I'll surely remember the story for sure.
yeah, I mean, my grandfather gave me 10,000 rupees in '94,
How?
and I just bought Pidlite shares back then, and right now
Oh,
I still own them. So
amazing.
it's actually better than my 6 cents
Oh,
investment,
is that
percentage wise.
percentage wise? So that's amazing. Sure. So finally, thanks a lot, Sanjay, for this. I mean, the ending was far better than the beginning. Though from maybe a martech standpoint, or even a customer success point standpoint, or even from a business standpoint, I might have learned a lot. The last 10 minutes was mind blowing, and gave us a lot to think, at least for me, and I think it will also be the same for our audience as well. And thanks a lot for sparing this time for us.
Hey, thanks for having me, and good luck to all the entrepreneurs out there. Like parting message is just don't give up. Sometimes you're at the brink of giving up, and then you put in that extra effort, and then you never know what's going to come. Like,
That's good.
every company struggles. We were that company, I think, in 2018 and again in 2020 during COVID. But just, think about how you can do better for your customers, and good things automatically happen.
That's good. Thanks a lot, Sanjay.
All right. See ya.